Let's talk about someone who Nigerians, or most Nigerians at least on the surface level, has accepted, Peter Obi. So this is the contrast, right? Peter Obi has been known by Nigerians, not on the national level, but at least I'm from Anambra State, so I've known Peter Obi for as long as, before he ran and when he was governor as well. I was in Nigeria then, so I know very well who Peter Obi is. And I'm also one of his biggest critics as well at this little level I'm operating at. But one thing that we cannot say for certain is that on the surface level, at least on social media, at the youth level, most youths or most people on social media, they've accepted Peter Obi. What are your thoughts on Peter Obi?
There's something that I've also seen as a general strategy to promote Peter Obi is to insert him into every conversation that people like us have, knowing that. But I will.
I mean, the reason why
I'll put it this way.
Yeah.
You understand? Except somebody who doesn't know numbers, even the acceptability of the Peter Obi you are talking about pales in comparison to Buhari's acceptance when he first ran for office, in which he got 12 million votes against Obasanjo, and I think Obasanjo got 24 at that time, even though we know they made up the numbers. He ran again. That 12 million votes has been a constant or a recurring decima in figures. And that time there was no social media, but these votes were coming in. So he was also seen as the most accepted person at that time, as against those who win elections. So, but like I said, I think the strategy these days is to inject Peter Obi into every conversation so that you can keep the myth that it's accepted. But if you look at the numbers, I'm talking about their own numbers now, it doesn't look to me that this assertion is true. You can say that about some young people. You can say that about even some old people. You can say that about certain demographics, Christians, for instance, and some of
course,
them,
Christians,
Northern Christians, who, in their response to the Muslim ticket, was looking for somebody, and he fit into their bill. But if you want to have a honest conversation about acceptance, I don't think you're diving deep enough to get it. But you have excused it by saying this is on the surface.
Yeah, social media. And
yes.
Stuff, yeah.
So, but you know that's
it's not real life.
It's not real.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
In terms of even the outcomes of their own elections.
Yeah.
So that's how I see it. But now that you got him injected into this conversation.
But what do you think of his personality? What do you think of him?
See, I know him as far back as 2007 or thereabout, when he was cheated out of the governorship at first, and he was introduced to me, not in person, but his situation, by a friend of mine I respect a lot, Ken Dibe, like from Anambra State as well. He's a great writer, and he said, "This is Peter Obi guy." We were all in the US at that time, and he's been cheated. And we went to work. He was, never met him. In fact, I met Peter Obi for the first time with Chinua Achebe.
Wow.
At an Achebe lecture several years later, I think, when he was now already governor. So he came and he was telling Achebe, Ojukwu was there too, and he came back. This was the day I knew that Ojukwu spoke Yoruba fluently, because I interviewed him.
Okay.
And it's still on the internet. And he said to Achebe, "So I'm meeting Sowore for the first time. This guy was the one who made me governor." And Achebe is like, "Yeah, I'm not sure," because Achebe and I were close. His family, myself, before he died. I mean, I sought Achebe out on my own. He's someone I've always loved. His books and his intellect.
Yeah.
So, and then Peter Obi said, "Can we meet upstairs?" And I said to him, "Please, I'm not doing all this meet upstairs." And my witness was his person at that time, Valentine Obinyam. That was his special advisor on publicity. Very rabid guy like that. So, and a few years later, came and said, this guy is such a substandard, liar. And we started evaluating Peter Obi's performance and found out that everything you heard in terms of publicity, and that's the way he was packaged this time around, was the opposite. Substandard buildings or things that were never done. They were packaging him.
Mediocrity.
Yes, it was mediocre. We got upset. And we started digging into it. I'm telling you, for the first time, to his governance, and found him to be a fake, as fake as they come.
I agree, 100%.
And he got upset. They went and printed posters in Anambra State. I think it was done by, Valentine, accusing me and Okedibe of being gay partners. So that's why I also knew that all the social media rabid attacks, he endorses it.
Yeah.
That's how he operates. But, he'll maintain dignified distance and act like if he sees you, greet you like.
Yeah.
But besides that facade, Peter Obi can lie.
Yeah.
When we were running for election, I noticed something about him. If Peter Obi wants to take a private jet, he will go and enter through commercial place. So he'll greet everybody, you think, and then they'll bring a vehicle and put him to go to the private jet area. One day we arrived and we came to campaign, and I think we're both in Lagos. We arrived on the same flight. This one was a commercial flight. And he waited for me. Maybe they deliberated at the entrance of the plane. And I greeted him. By that very time, we took pictures. I had not left. I posted the picture of myself, and these people were like, Sowore has bowed down for Obi. But here is the next part. So we entered the vehicle. I saw him entering a vehicle, and I followed. Turns out he was going to the private section where they treat VIPs.
Oh.
And then saw him with a whole coterie of, I said, but you came alone, and they were all there. Apparently, those ones probably flew on a private jet.
Okay.
But he decided to fly commercial. And I now asked the guy who was driving, because we were in a car, a Hilux van. I said, let's wait and see what Peter Obi drives. Because I was actually expecting that he was driving, the Innocent Motors.
Okay.
Peter Obi had nothing less than 10 big Toyota SUVs waiting for him. There was this Mercedes Space Boss. And I was telling myself, why do you have to lie? So why do you have to cover up all this? Nobody's going to be upset with you that you're a presidential candidate if you have a convoy. But look at this trajectory. And that packaging is his style.
Yeah.
And if you want to get away with finding out, then he'll send his people after you. Yeah. So when you saw that I stood my ground in 2023 against him, I knew him. And he knew that I knew him. But there were guys who were against him in those days who didn't have the courage to come out again because they were afraid of the backlash. And they did a fantastic job of scaring everybody.
Yeah, for some people, it may work for some people. For some others, it only adds the fire to them to keep on speaking out.
So that's like I said, you wanted to hear this. Now you know it.
No, I've always known. The reason why I bring it up is kind of linking back to what we said about before. Like, for me, I always feel why did they choose Obi, at least on the surface level?
Let me explain to you a very succinct explanation. And see, after NSAS, anybody who is a student of politics or history knows that the young people who fought a system they never thought could capitulate, because the system capitulated under NSAS.
It was shaky. Yeah.
It was shaking to its core. And they saw it. They usually go for power. And when that happened, he was presented to them as the new face of the struggle. And it was all packaging, like I said. The elites came and said, look, if we allow one young person or all these young people to go with a person we can't talk to, we are finished. So they had to invest in that. And that was what produced him. And the people that did it know themselves. They were the NSAS connoisseurs. The people who made it through NSAS, who became popular NSAS. They all rallied themselves together. And I was aware when they were planning it. But I said, how can you do this? Because this guy is establishment boy. Those were the first set of people that started attacking us. And I can mention their names. Aisha, we were in a group. Macaroni was there, Deji Adeyanju, Aisha, Faz, Femi Falan. We were in a group after NSAS, and Aisha kept saying, whomever is here, you should go and run for local government to House of Rep. And one day I called her, I said, who's going to be president? She said, I don't care. Just make sure that anybody, we go and take over. So I called our people, I said, look at the game Aisha is playing. They already have a candidate. At that time, I didn't know it was Peter Obi. But they had been working on that ground before that time to present him as a candidate. And they had prepared who was going to be a stumbling block and how they were going to attack everybody and overwhelm everybody so that nobody can oppose their decision. It was a tyranny of a minority.
Yeah.
Even Wole Soyinka confessed to me that he fell for it up to a point. He's like, I was almost endorsing this guy. And then he woke up one day and his name was all over and he said he was asking, what did I do wrong? What did I do wrong? It turns out they just picked on him for no reason. And he became, even though he didn't participate in the election, he became, the most ridiculed person after the election. That was what got him upset.
Yeah.
And he said, if this is my last assignment on earth, I'm going to let people know who you people are. Yeah, so.
No, he didn't hold back in my interview with him as well.
Before your interview, he had not. Anywhere he was asked this kind of question, his answer was harsher.
Exactly.
But mine is more analytical.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think for me, it's just as someone who wants to learn more about the mechanics of power, like how does power work, like the mechanics of power and politics, like how does politics really work, and how does media work. I can remember, like a few years ago, I didn't really understand how important information warfare was. Like I was quite naive.
Yeah.
It was like I was listening to one podcast, Tim Pool, and I'm sure you know Tim Pool and Steve Bannon.
Yes.
And Steve Bannon talked about 3 kinds of warfare according to Sun Tzu. I had read Sun Tzu before, but it didn't stick to me what he was going to say. 3 kinds of warfare: kinetic warfare, information warfare, and economic warfare. And I've always thought about information warfare. What does that mean? Like how? And obviously, as time went, and okay, this is how information warfare works. This is how propaganda works. This is how you can package, in my opinion, a failed governor in Anambra State, and you can wash him and you can paint him to become this god-like figure, this saint who has never committed a sin before. Who, in my opinion, if you went to Anambra State is a failed state. Anambra State is not working. All the roads they built are substandard. They've all spoiled today. And in my opinion, he didn't really work till his last year in office. He then began doing something. Like for the first 7 years before, obviously there was some cuts when the courts asked him to leave. But in the 7 years he was in power, or in the 7 years before the 8 years,
I don't even think this needs an explanation.
No, the reason why I'm saying is
in
because
my view,
someone else who is out there might be listening to some may not know. Because let's talk for example.
Let me tell
SARS,
you, there will still be someone else out there, or a majority, who have been so brainwashed.
Yeah, but I think it's also important for
that
us.
They would. You see, the biggest fear of people who engage in information warfare. Warfare, and especially the ones who add cancellation to it.
Yes,
is how to retreat. Because it is always worse if they retreat. Because everybody is now waiting for them in the corner. Both those they deceive, people that were collateral damages to it. And, in the history of this country, I think maybe, because I wasn't around during the Civil War, maybe this level of information warfare was probably more deployed during the Civil War than I've seen in recent times. You can talk about Buhari's time, but
this one is
internet
more,
was young.
Exactly.
The internet penetration was little during Buhari's period. And that one was a little bit different in the sense that there was at least a country that felt like things are not going well.
Yes.
But this one is people jamming down information.
This one is more sophisticated.
It's
much more sophisticated.
And saying to you, you better eat it. If you don't, you can't leave. So, and that's the way it happened. And it didn't spare anybody. Interestingly, I predicted it in our own cycle. I said, prepare for this. Because it got to a point, even some of the guys I know who can withstand stuff like that had to they ran away. It was like
pressure becomes too much.
They were so scared to be labeled as being anti what had been presented as the only alternative.
Yeah, but how can you package someone who oversaw the worst SARS killing in Nigeria?
It doesn't matter.
SARS, I interviewed one of the ladies who lost her brothers to SARS in Anambra State. And I was in Anambra when this happened. I know when the 50 dead bodies were seen floating in Ezu River, and I was there. I know when it happened. I was in Anambra then I was in Unizik.
Okay.
So I knew how the state felt. Like it was a shock to everyone in the States. How can you wake up one morning and suddenly dead bodies are floating in the river? And then suddenly we turn this governor who oversaw that because he was gone when it happened. But what obedience do is to say, oh, he doesn't have power over SARS. But those same obedience criticize Sanwo-Olu over NSAS. So which one is it? And as governor of the state, every Nigerian knows you have power in your state. You have the last say. You cannot say that SARS you don't know what SARS is doing. Every Nigerian knows that SARS was this extrajudicial.
Look, you know what I would want to say? Now that we've spoken about Obi, can we move on? I know you love.
The reason I'm saying that is that our job. I think our job is also
your job, my job, would never finish over. It's not just a lot of people did not know Babangida until he launched a book. That was the kind of aura he created around himself when he was military head of state. You could not criticize him.
Yeah.
He created guys who said Babangida was God. There were judges who proclaimed Babangida Kabiesi, that you can't bring a case against Babangida in front of them.
Yeah.
There was this information minister, Alex Akinyele, who said that he would rather, let me just extremely say that he would rather keep his head inside his rear than breathe normal air. So you find that from time to time in history. And these are not accidents, they are contrived. So what I'm saying is, it's also important for us to move past those kind of conversations.
Yeah.
And also use them as benchmarks for things that, as the Chinese say, never again.
Yeah, but I think our job is also to educate ourselves and see how the game is being played. For me personally, my job I think doing this little stuff I'm doing on this media stuff is to educate my audience on how politics works, on how the mechanics of politics work, on how information warfare, propaganda, how it works. For me, I'm fascinated by it. I love it. I love seeing how these things work. I love seeing how politics is being played, how the social media works. And for me, it's just so fascinating to me to just see how you can take someone like that and suddenly the guy becomes a national figure that everyone must worship.
But if you look at it, everybody has done that for presidents. Somebody also
on this level,
somebody packaged Tinubu too.
Yeah, but on
with
this
all
level,
his drug history, and said it doesn't matter. The only difference is that they did not care, and they also probably were more subtle in the sense that they didn't say to you like, "Oh, he's not." He doesn't say.
Yeah.
They were like, we're not sure that he was selling drugs. If and then when you presented the evidence, like, so what? He was selling drugs, but the penalty wasn't the penalty for people selling drugs. It was for somebody whose account was accidentally used, to collect OPay, So they were more like subtle. But if you look at it at the end of the day, everybody was trying to present their worst as the best so that they can get Nigeria to bow to their political agenda. And in every case, we know all these people.
Yeah.
Every other thing behind it is to look at it and say, hey, how do we counter AC? Who's likely to come out and say this guy is bad? And in their WhatsApp groups, they said, we're going to keep saying that he has a bad hair. That's our talking point. Yeah. How do we counter Shoyinka? Oh, let's just say that he has corn in his pocket, and get some artists to draw his hair with corn in it. And how do we counter Sowore? Oh, let's just say that Sowore brought Buhari to power. That would be our talking point. But when you look at it, ask yourself, if they didn't choose Obi as a candidate in 2020, do you know who they were going to choose?
Who?
Osinbajo. That was their candidate. In fact, it was Osinbajo that first provided some of the Christian leaders that started working with Obi, because that was the original candidate. And Osinbajo was Buhari's deputy. So if you hated Buhari, as you claimed, why is Osinbajo? Why are you in love with his deputy? They never hated Buhari. They wanted power. And they were going to go get it using whomever was available or acceptable, not who was desirable. Operating word, desirable.
Yeah. I mean, looking forward to 2 years from now, do you think he stands a chance?
Who?
Peter Obi.
Anybody stands a chance in this republic. In fact, you'll be surprised that in 2 years' time, Obi may not even have a political party. And they'll bring another person. Or Obi may not even run as a president. Maybe he might run as a deputy to someone. Because his people are already preparing the public for whomever he becomes. You get my point?
Yes.
If he joins an armed robbery gang, they'll tell you that, let him just rob until we get power, he will change. If he joins a kidnapping gang, I'm like, hey, how many people did he kidnap, Seth? Let's forget about it. Because just like you mentioned Steve Bannon, I think there's a similarity with what Steve and the rest of them did for Trump. Everybody said, oh, Trump didn't pay tax. Like, forget about it. It's not his fault. It's the tax people that didn't collect tax. Oh, he touched a woman inappropriate. Like, what's your problem? That's not even his type. You say, oh, he is a racist. Like, why did you go rent a house where you can't afford to pay for it? You say, he doesn't care about, black people. And like, hey, what do you want him to do? Is he black? You say, he doesn't like people, with different sexual orientations. You say, oh, if he does, would he be sleeping with one of them? So, and they got away with that and brought him back. And he's back now doing exactly what I've always wanted him to do, which is to shut down the U.S. that pretends to be friendly towards human rights and become a nation of supremacists.